association to boycott Target, now surpassing 1 million signatures and counting.
People have their own beliefs and stuff, but what can it hurt? What can it hurt? What can it hurt?
It hurts our daughters.
It hurts you.
It hurts our families.
It hurts me.
It hurts all of us.
Sign the petition to boycott Target at afa.net.
Not only was there no collusion, but there was a coordinated effort to take this president down.
The 2020 candidates now see that the wheels are falling off the cart of the Mueller investigation and barely mention it.
When the American people see what I've seen, they will judge for themselves and know that this has all been a hoax. Even ambassadors that were involved in part of this.
I've had an opportunity to interact with racist people throughout my life, and he is not one. You know, he believes that a rising tide lifts all boats, and he doesn't go around playing identity politics. He said, let's just fix this so that everybody does well.
There is no such thing as an illegal human.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome to a brand new edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. And I am your humble host, congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent.
As always.
And you, my friends, are my loyal and faithful listening audience, also congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent.
As always.
All right, so let's have a little bit of fun. Number one, first thing I want to mention, remind you, as we have our Share-a-thon coming up this spring, we want to get listener stories. These are stories from you and others like you who are listeners to AFR and or to Focal Point. So we want to gather stories to use during Share-a-thon to talk about the impact that AFR has had. So if AFR or Focal Point has made a difference in your life, if we've been there with the right thought, the right passage of Scripture at the right time, we'd like to hear from you. We'd like to hear your AFR or your Focal Point story. Could be a blessing and an encouragement to others. Call, you can record, leave your comments, and it'll air possibly during Share-a-thon. Number to call, listener storyline is 877-876-8893. Write it down. I'm going to give it one more time. Write it down so you can call in. Call in right now and leave your listener story. 877-876-8893. Now, want to turn our attention to a knotty question. And knotty, I mean Knotty, a question that's tied up in a knot, and theologians and Bible scholars have for centuries been trying to cut this Gordian knot. And that is the knot, that is the controversy about whether James and the Apostle Paul had a different view of justification by faith. Martin Luther, looking at the passage we're going to consider today, said that the Epistle of James is an epistle of straw. He was barely ready to retain this book in the biblical canon. So people for centuries have seen that have thought that James and Paul were in tension here, that their views contradicted, that they conflicted, that Paul's view, you are saved by faith through grace alone, and that not of yourselves, that is the gift of God, that was a different view of justification than what James says in James 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to consider that question for a few moments. Now let's read some excerpts from James chapter 2. Remember, he'd just been talking about the necessary importance of obeying the law, looking at the law of liberty, not going away and forgetting what we've seen in the law, but going away and tailoring our lives after the law of liberty, after the standards that we run across in the Scriptures. and obeying them all. If you violate one, you've broken the whole thing. Here's what James says. What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him? He goes on, if a brother or sister is poorly clothed, lacking in daily food, and one of you says to him, go in peace, be warmed and filled, without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? So also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. Someone will say, well, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. You believe that God is one. You do well. Even the demons believe and shudder. Do you want to be shown, you foolish person, that faith apart from works is useless? Was not Abraham, our father, justified by works when he offered up his son Isaac on the altar? You see that faith was active along with his works, and faith was completed by his works, and the scripture was fulfilled that says Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. You see that a person is justified by works and not by faith alone. And then he talks about Rahab in the same way. As the body apart from the spirit is dead, so also faith apart from works is dead. Now, there's a very simple way to reconcile this apparent conflict. It does look at first glance like James is saying something different than Paul. Paul was quite emphatic. Man is saved by faith alone apart from works. Now, James says, no, a man is saved by his works. Why are they compatible? Well, here's what James is saying. Notice this very clearly. He says in verse 14, if someone says he has faith but does not have works, can that faith save him? So in other words, what James is talking about here is not a difference of opinion about whether a man is saved by faith. Listen to me carefully now on this. James is not disagreeing with the position of Paul that a man is saved by faith. What James is answering here in this passage is the question, what kind of faith saves a man? What kind of faith justifies a man? And he goes on to say, look, there are two kinds of faith. There's a faith that the demons in hell have. It's a purely intellectual faith. Doesn't change their behavior in the least. They believe that God is one, and rather than being drawn to God by their knowledge and their affirmation that God is one, they recoil in stark terror. So that's what James is saying. If you don't have a faith that produces works, it's not faith at all. It's not a saving faith. In other words, the kind of faith that saves a man is a faith that produces works. I want to boil it down for you as simply as I can. The kind of faith that saves a man is a faith that works. And that man will be saved apart from his works. He will be saved by his faith. But because that faith is genuine, it will produce works. It can't help but produce works because the real thing, genuine faith, is so attached to God, believes in God so deeply in the heart, not the head, that he must do what God asks him to do. So what James is saying, what Paul is saying, man is saved by faith. James is saying the kind of faith that saves a man is a faith that produces works. If it doesn't produce works, it's dead. It's useless. Those are terms that he uses here, and that kind of a faith cannot save a man. You know, we know a lot of people that will kind of verbalize agreement with the gospel. Yeah, I believe that. But it's not sincere. They don't mean a word of it, and it makes absolutely no difference in the way they live. Can that kind of a faith save a man? The answer is absolutely, flatly no. And with that assessment, Paul would agree with James. So man is saved by a faith that works, a faith that produces works. Well, let's go to prayer before the Lord, and together let's take these concepts to God in prayer. Lord Jesus, in your name, I ask you to turn your attention this day not only to me, but also to my family, to the families of my co-workers, Jeff and Rob, to every man, woman, and child in this land, to our elected officials, our mayors, our governor, our president, and that you will, by the transforming work of your Spirit, I pray that we will be among those who recognize that faith without works is useless. Protect us from the error of thinking that we can be saved by a faith that produces no works. I pray that we will not say to a brother or sister who is poorly clothed or lacking in daily food, go in peace, be warmed and filled, and then do nothing about their physical needs. Remind us that faith by itself, unless it is accompanied by action, is dead. Prompt us to show our faith by what we do. May we imitate the example of Abraham, who was considered righteous for what he did when he offered his son Isaac on the altar through faith. I pray that our faith and our actions will work together as his did, so that our faith may be made complete by what we do. Like him, I pray that we will be called your friends because of our faith and obedience. May our faith be counted to you as righteousness. And I pray that we will imitate Rahab, who was considered righteous for what she did when she received Israel's messengers and sent them out by another way. Prompt us to recognize that we are justified by a faith that produces works, and not by a faith that exists by itself alone. We know that the body without the Spirit is dead, and that faith without works is dead. We ask you to produce in us a living, active, saving faith that produces works and pleases you. Amen. All right, a lot we're going to get to in the program today, depending on how much we can squeeze in to the limited time that we have. So let's dive right in. You know, these are a couple of stories I wouldn't even deal with unless they illustrated something about the spiritual life that I find kind of intriguing, and that is scientists are discovering that we have an inbuilt compass that has an ability to respond to the genetic, basically, I mean, not genetic, but the magnetic compass, magnetic north. There's something in the human brain that enables some human beings to sense compass directions. And they built this room with all kinds of sensors, blindfolded people. They had a machine that would simulate the direction, the magnetic pull of the earth, and they pointed at different directions and examined the brain waves of the people, and they found that some of them, their brain waves would shift in the direction of the magnetic compass. Now, whatever that capacity is, I don't have it. I mean, I absolutely get turned around. I get completely turned around. And I find this happens every time I travel. You know, I've been traveling some for AFA, going to these donor events. I'll walk into a bookstore. We get out off the plane. We start walking through the concourse. I go into a bookstore, and when I come out of the bookstore, I turn the wrong direction every time. Debbie has to sit outside the store to keep an eye on me, or she'll lose me in the airport. So whatever this thing is, I don't have it. But I think it's kind of it's analogous to the human conscience. You know, we have a conscience, all of us. Now, I want to assure you that our conscience is not infallible with regard to God's law, but it is an infallible indicator of what our standard of right and wrong is. Now, it may need to be educated. You know, our conscience, when we're young Christians, our conscience may trouble us with things that when we are mature Christians don't trouble us anymore. We may be offended when we're young and weak Christians by the thought of other Christians having a drink of wine with dinner. And as we've grown and matured in our faith, we come to understand that that in and of itself is not a sin. So the conscience bothers us at an early stage of development. When it's educated by the Scriptures, our conscience no longer bothers us. But it is an infallible guide to what we ourselves believe in our soul and spirit is right and what is wrong. And we disobey our conscience at our peril. Remember, James says later in this book, the one who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, for him it is a sin. So when we sin against our own conscience, regardless of how well aligned that conscience is with the Word of God. That, my friends, is a sin. You know, we've got another thing that a friend of mine calls your knower. That's right down here in your gut. That's your knower. I mean, it knows things before your brain knows them, before you can reason out. Your knower, that's the human spirit, and it knows things before the rest of you does. And so we need to pay attention to the knower and pay attention to our conscience. Focal Point, American Family Radio. Be right back.
But evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. California Assemblyman Jesse Gabriel has proposed a bill that would force every public or private school in the state to place the phone number of a Planned Parenthood or similar place on student IDs. AB 624 would take effect in 2020 and require that schools place on every ID for grades 7 through 12 a sexual assault hotline, a domestic violence hotline, and a sexual or reproductive health hotline. Reproductive health is the phrase baby murder proponents use to cloak the barbarism. Why is California so committed to forcing citizens to become spokespersons for abortion?
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner. For more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Dr. Richard Land, President of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. By now, we have all heard and seen reports of the horrendous attacks at the Noor Mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand. At least 50 people in peaceful prayer and worship in a mosque were massacred in cold-blooded mass murder. The alleged perpetrator, Brenton Tarrant, a 28-year-old Australian white supremacist, issued a rambling 87-page, hate-filled statement entitled The Great Replacement. Many commentators in America have rushed to blame President Trump's warnings about Islamic terrorism as a causal factor in this terrible attack. Actually, the inspiration came from France, including the title and the writings of a Frenchman named Renaud Camus. Camus has decried what he calls the reverse colonization of France and Western Europe by Middle Eastern and African immigrants. Mr. Tarrant, the suspect in New Zealand, said he despaired when French white nationalist Marine Le Pen lost so badly to President Macron, writing, quote, "My belief in a democratic solution vanished," end quote. Make no mistake, these killings are horrendous, and the hatred that motivated them must be denounced and rejected. But Mr. Trump is not the source. France is not even the real source. The real source is the sinfulness of the human heart, and the Lord Jesus is the only lasting antidote to that lethal poison. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy, welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Glad to have you in the conversation. Want to do a little bit of follow-up on the massacre in New Zealand. We detest it. We abhor it. We condemn it. I said on my program, you know, the left is kind of beating me up over this. They claim I'm justifying what this guy's doing. I'm trying to justify it, or I'm defending him or justifying what he did. And it's ridiculous if you listen to everything that I said. I said, look, the guy that did this is not how we solve problems like this. This is vigilante justice, which is not justice at all. This is not how we go about settling these matters. That's what government is for, to provide protection for us and to settle these things. This is not how we do these things. But, you know, one of the issues that's, and this guy should be executed, publicly executed, and we should live stream his execution to the whole world so everybody knows what the West does to somebody who kills legally innocent people without cause. Now, And I started talking about this yesterday, the number of times in recent history where Muslims have killed whole bunches of Christians and nobody knows about it because it's a ho-hum to the media. You know why? Because it happens so often, there's no news in it. These kind of massacres that we saw in New Zealand, they happen every day, ladies and gentlemen. Somewhere in the world, Christians being killed in bunches at the hands of Muslims. Let me just give you one example. This is a story from Jihad Watch. At least 120, remember there are 49 people that were killed in this mosque, these two mosques. But here's a story from the Christian Post. 120 people were killed and 140 homes have been destroyed by Muslims in Nigeria since February. So that's what, in the last 2 months? Have you heard or read anything about that? 120 Christians massacred, killed in cold blood, and the homes of 140 families burned to the ground. Have you heard anything about that? Absolutely not. Now, can you imagine, on the other hand, if it was a marauding band of white nationalists that were out there doing this to Muslims? You would have heard about it. You would have been reading about it. It'd be the lead story on the news every single night. And this is a series of massacres that have been carried out. This latest attack on Monday, this is just yesterday, latest attack on Monday, Nigerian time, 50 people were killed, and then 140 homes, the ones that are in the story, were killed. 52 people were killed, dozens injured, around 143 homes destroyed. Now, this Monday attack followed one on Sunday, the day before, in a village in which 17 people were killed and dozens of homes were burned at the hands of Muslims. In late February, that was less than a month ago, there was another attack that resulted in the deaths of about 38 Christians and saw homes and a church burned. Back on February 10 people were killed in an attack on another village, as 6 others were killed in isolated attacks the day before. So that's 120 Christians massacred, 143 homes destroyed in the last 2 weeks. This is in Nigeria, and you haven't heard a word about it. Why? Because this is common. This is common in parts of the world where Muslims comprise a significant enough percentage of the population. That's why I say Islam has got to be stopped. If we don't want to see this kind of stuff in the United States of America, we must stop the river at its source. We must suspend Islamic immigration altogether into the United States of America. Donald Trump has the authority to do that. He's used it. The Supreme Court has upheld his right to do it.
Brian, also there's another stat that came out from Open Doors. It does a lot of good work on persecution.
Yes.
Facts don't care about your feelings. Somebody said that once, and it makes a lot of sense. Here's a fact put out by Open Doors. A Christian living in a Muslim country is 143 times more likely to be killed for being a Christian than a Muslim is in a Western country. So the difference or the cries about Islamophobia, I'm not seeing how that's playing out.
Just absurd. 149 times
143 times more likely to be killed than a Muslim would be.
So if you're a Christian in a Muslim country,
yeah,
143 times more likely to be killed than a Muslim in a Western country.
Correct.
That's all you need to know, ladies. That's your Fisher factoid of the day, courtesy of Jeff Reed. It's the Reed, what do we call it? The Reed, whatever. Fisher factoid sounds. Let's go with Fisher factoid, courtesy of Jeff Reed.
Fisher factoid Jr. How about
Fisher
that?
factoid Jr. So that is
With
the
bacon.
Fisher fact. This is the Fisher factoid of the day. Learn it, live it, love it. A Christian, repeat after me, a Christian in a Muslim country is 143 times more likely to be murdered than a Muslim in a Christian or Western country. 143 times. So master that little factoid.
Yeah, I think we could call it the Reed stats.
Yeah. All right.
I like that. Read stats.
Read stats. Well, we'll come up with something else. Yeah. We need something that goes with read, some alliteration there.
Maybe our Facebook Live people will chime in.
Now, here's another thing that is absolutely typical of Islam that you did not read about or hear about on the news. ISIS, the leader of ISIS, is calling on Muslims around the world to take revenge for the New Zealand terror attack. Calling on Muslims around the world to take revenge. Go out and kill some infidels, because that's what Muhammad tells us to do. Doesn't matter if they're guilty or not. You're justified in doing it, because that's what right. Infidels have no right to live. Muhammad tells us to kill them, tells us to cut off their heads, tell us to kill them wherever we find them. So go ahead and do that. That is the spokesman for ISIS. Take vengeance for their religion. He spent 44 minutes talking about this in this recording. The slaughter in those two mosques is no more than another tragedy among past and coming tragedies, which will be followed by scenes of force that reach all who were tricked to living among the polytheists. The scenes of death are enough to wake the sleep and incite the supporters of the caliphate who live there to take vengeance for their religion and for the sons of their ummah who are killed everywhere in the world. And he went on to say that ISIS repeats the argument that Muslims and non-Muslims cannot live side by side. And you know, that is actually a true fact. True Muslims, genuine Muslims, devoted Muslims cannot live side by side with Christians without eventually something happening, because the Quran tells them, number one, kill them wherever you find them. And number two, you are not to take Jews and Christians as your friends. That's a direct prohibition in the Quran. You shall not take Jews and Christians for your friends. You know, I just got a reminder from the executive producer. We call it the Read Report. That's the Read Report for today.
Yeah, or somebody else suggested the Read Rundown.
Read Rundown. Oh, Read Report. We've used that before. That works pretty well.
Yeah, I like that one.
So that's the Read Report for the day. And Jeff, again, repetition is the mother of learning. Summarize that Read Report for us.
A Christian is 143 times more likely to be killed for his faith in a Muslim country than a Muslim is to be killed in a Western country.
All right, that's the Read Report for today. And
I like this one. Somebody just put "Read 'em and weep" report.
The read 'em and weep factoid. That's pretty good.
Yeah, pretty
Read 'em
clever.
and weep factoid. Anyway, so that business about ISIS calling for revenge around the world on just innocent infidels, you haven't heard that anywhere in the media because it doesn't fit their narrative. And their narrative, Christianity and white Europeans, we are the problem. We're the scourge of all evil. I've got a poll somewhere here in the stack talking about 46% of Americans believe that America is the prime source of evil in the world. 46%. Now, that just comes from this relentless hammering by the media that America is the source of all evil. Meanwhile, this is from Breitbart, media silence surrounds the Muslim massacre of Christians. Absolute silence surrounding the simultaneous massacre of scores of Christians by Muslim militants in Africa. Remember, one of those massacres was on Sunday, the other was on Monday. The New Zealand shooting was on Friday, so this is contemporaneous and not a blip. Breitbart News is the only major news outlet to even report the story that these Muslim jihadists had racked up a death toll of 120 and burned 140 homes. New York Times, they say that they produce all the news that's fit to print. Not a peep, not a word. Washington Post didn't mention it. Chicago Tribune didn't mention it. Detroit Free Press didn't mention it. LA Times. Every other major paper in the United States did not mention it. The three major television networks did not mention it on their shows. And again, the reason for this is very simple. Muslims being killed by Christians, that's rare. That's newsworthy. Muslims being killed by Christians, that's rare, so that's why it's newsworthy. Christians being killed by Muslims, that's just ho-hum. This happens all the time, not even newsworthy any longer. some pastors in Africa wrote this: no one much cares about offending Christians. In fact, mocking, belittling, and blaspheming Christianity is becoming a bit of a trend in our culture. Anti-Christian bigotry truly is the last acceptable form of prejudice. And around the world, 75% of all of the victims of religious persecution are Christians. 75% around the world. All right, got a winnable war moment for you. This is from Roswell, New Mexico. Now, Roswell, New Mexico, that's famous for the alien that came and landed there back in 1947. Anyway, Roswell, New Mexico has become the first sanctuary city for unborn human beings. Yes, you heard that right. Roswell, New Mexico declared itself a sanctuary city for the unborn. If you live, it might be time, if you live in a city where you've got a city council that might be somewhat receptive or even isn't, go to your council member, talk to your mayor if you live in a small enough town where you know him, and recommend that they do something similar in their city council. This is a 7-1 vote, and it declared its jurisdiction to be in support of fetal life. And pro-life activist says, look, this makes Roswell a sanctuary city for the unborn. 7-1 vote.
Amen.
City council there passed a resolution that declares, quote, innocent life, including fetal life, must always be protected, and society must protect those who cannot protect themselves. It also said the city council officially declares its opposition to any diminution by the New Mexico legislature of the limitations on abortion, end quote, and, quote, honors the rights of healthcare providers to object on moral grounds to performing abortions and opposes any regulation or law seeking to violate that right. Now, it's interesting. This came in the wake of the New Mexico Senate. They were considering a pro-abortion bill, listen to this, that would have forced doctors to commit abortions. It would have required them, as a condition of serving as a physician in the state of New Mexico, to perform abortions when called upon to do so. That was going to be the law, that you would be violating the law if you refused to butcher a human being in the womb. Now, fortunately, the New Mexico Senate rejected that bill 24-18. All 16 Republicans voted against it, and 8 Democrats, to their credit, also voted to deny this bill or vote for this resolution in opposition to that bill. But that means there's 18 legislators in the state Senate of New Mexico. Sounds like 18 legislators, in my view, that need to be replaced. For those of you listening in New Mexico, tuck that in the back of your brain, and let's see if we can do something about that. Mm-hmm. Now, here's what the American College of Pediatricians has stated, and the Roswell resolution uses the Declaration of Independence as part of the resolution. The Creator bestowing on us certain inalienable rights, among which are first the right to life. That came from the Creator, came from God, according to the founders and the Constitution. But they also refer to a paper from the American College of Pediatricians. Now, who do pediatricians take care of? They take care of children. So this is the American College of Pediatricians. Every doctor in this college is a pediatrician by trade. He's a medical doctor, a medical professional, a doctor who treats health care for children. Here's a quote from their paper. The predominance of human biological research confirms that human life begins at conception-fertilization. At fertilization, the human being emerges as a whole, genetically distinct, individuated, zygotic living human organism, a member of the species Homo sapiens, needing only the proper environment to grow and develop. The difference between the individual in its adult state and its zygotic state is one of form, not of nature. American College of pediatricians. Here's some more hypocrisy, if you need more of this, from our lawmakers. Senate liberals, if you can believe this, they are fighting right now in Congress for the humane treatment of kittens. 17 days after they voted to kill America's perfectly healthy infant children, they're trying to protect newborn kittens. I'll come back and have to finish the story on the other side, but get ready for that. So our senators care more for kittens than they do for babies. That's Democrats versus Republicans, ladies and gentlemen.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
Welcome to segment 12 of Medicare for All. The Medicare for All bill shows how bureaucrats and politicians often make big promises, yet in the fine print list all the exceptions to those promises. For example, the bill says states determine provider qualifications through licensure or certification. But state standards would have to follow national minimum standards set by the federal government. Federal officials would use these federal standards to monitor medical care in the states. Hospitals, other facilities, and individual practitioners would only get paid for services under the Act if they comply with whatever standards are set by federal bureaucrats. States will not be in charge. Washington would set all the rules.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly E-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
Thoughts of the child you were carrying keep pouring over in your mind. You wish things could be different, and the loss is overwhelming. A deep, unrelenting sadness overshadows your days, and you wonder if you will feel whole again. There is hope and healing from a reproductive loss. Call the International Helpline, 866-482-LIFE, and talk with someone who has been where you are. Your call is confidential, 866-482-LIFE.
So they asked me to enter my email address, and the next thing I know, I start getting emails from companies I never even knew existed. What's up with that?
Here at the American Family Association, you have our word that we won't give away, sell, or lease your email address to any other organization or company. We're thankful when you take the time to subscribe to AFA Action Alerts, 1 Million Moms, Engage Magazine, or any of our other online newsletters. The Ministry of Preborn meets abortion-minded women right where they are. When a young mom sees her baby on ultrasound, she's 80% more likely to keep her baby.
And I got to hear and see my baby for the first time. Hearing the heartbeat made me cry, and it was certain that I was going to keep my baby forever.
This mom chose life for her baby.
She's been such a joy. Her name even means rebirth and sort of being raised up from the ashes. I now see my daughter, and I cannot imagine my life without my happy, lovely, joyful, smart baby, and I'm so grateful.
Preborn runs and leads Christian pregnancy centers all over the country. To find out more, go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Or dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Your love can save a life.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Howdy doody, and welcome back to the last segment of Focal Point on American Family Radio.
That would probably bring back some memories.
Yeah,
for some
it did.
people.
Yeah. You know, and I never once watched that show, the Howdy Doody show. I have never seen 5 minutes of that show in my life. So
it was on its way out when I was a kid.
You were young.
But,
all right, so anyway, howdy. Welcome back to the last segment of Focal Point, the fastest 60 minutes in American media. So buckle up, because we are going to hit the gas pedal here in the last segment. Finish the story about the kitten and what it reveals about Democrat hypocrisy. This is from FRC.org. Senate liberals picked this moment, 17 days after they voted to kill America's perfectly healthy infants, to fight for the humane treatment of kittens. Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrat from Oregon, here he is arguing that America, quote, must stop killing kittens, end quote, when 3 weeks ago he stood in the U.S. Capitol and agreed with 43 Democrats that human beings should be put down. Quote, the USDA's decision to slaughter kittens after they are used in research is an archaic practice and horrific treatment, and we need to end it, he said with a passion that he and his colleagues couldn't muster for a generation of perfectly healthy newborns. It's even called the Kitten Act. Merkley says this, the Kitten Act will protect these innocent animals from being needlessly euthanized in government testing and make sure that they can be adopted by loving families instead.
Wow.
So what this senator is saying, that these kittens must be treated so they can be adopted. He wants newborn babies just killed, slaughtered. So much medical waste. But these kittens, oh no, we have to save them so they can be adopted. And all of these senators say, well, killing a child is a personal decision. Congress shouldn't get in the way. Well, why isn't killing a kitten a personal decision then in exactly the same way? So anyway, that's the latest from the insanity on Capitol Hill. All right, let's get to, by the way, they've identified Jack the Ripper. I don't know if you knew that. Identified him from DNA on a shawl that was found at one of the crime sites. There was a shawl that had the blood of two of the victims and the blood of Jack the Ripper on it, and they were able to use the DNA to trace back to the actual Jack the Ripper, a guy who was a Polish barber, if you can believe that. All right, I'm just going to grab these, Rob. We're just going to run through these top to bottom, get as many of these in as we can.
I'm ready.
You know, if I'm not careful, Rob will just hit the go button. When it's done, he'll just hit the go button for the next one, and he'll let me wait till they've all run before I get a word in. Anyway, Ben Carson was talking about Donald Trump. You know, the accusation is Donald Trump is a racist. You cannot hardly turn on a left-wing media website. Donald Trump's a racist. Trump is a racist. Trump's a white nationalist. Trump is a white supremacist. All that kind of thing. And here is Ben Carson. Ben Carson, of course, African-American. He's the Secretary of House and Urban Development, which means he has been around the president a lot. Here's what he had to say about President Trump.
There's a narrative that's being painted there, but, you know, I've had an opportunity to interact with racist people throughout my life, and he is not one. He is so easy to be around, so relaxed, and treats you with the utmost respect. And, you know, I talked with him early on about the plight of many people, particularly in the inner city, and the compassion that he showed is very impressive. But, you know, he doesn't wear it on his sleeve. You know, he believes that a rising tide lifts all boats. And he doesn't go around playing identity politics. He said, let's just fix this so that everybody does well.
All right, so Clarence Thomas, who I would consider to be, not Clarence Thomas, but Ben Carson, a pretty solid authority on the subject, says, I've been around Donald Trump a lot, and he is not a racist. All right, let's go to clip number 2. This is Mark Meadows, head of the Freedom Caucus, the most conservative cluster of Republicans in Congress, talking with Sean Hannity about the fact that the Mueller investigation and new discoveries and revelations, we're not done with all that yet. We have the 302s have not been released. The 302s are the interviews that FBI agents do with people of who whatever come within the range of the investigation, and they don't record these interviews, but they write down their recollections of the events right after they take place. They're a pretty reliable indicator of what went down. So here's Mark Meadows talking to Sean Hannity.
Let's talk about the volume of what is to come. We know about we haven't seen the FISA applications, 302s, Gang 8. That's all coming. And the interviews. More than that, too?
Well, there is more than that. So it's not just some of the transcribed interviews that you're talking about, Sean, but it is additional information that is coming out that will show not only was there no collusion, but there was a coordinated effort to take this president down. We talk about the deep state. There are players now, even ambassadors that are sitting ambassadors that were involved in part of this with the FBI and DOJ. And so as we look at this, it's time that we show the American people what's out there, declassify some of those documents. I think when the American people see what I've seen, they will judge for themselves and know that this has all been a hoax.
This has all been a hoax. You even got ambassadors involved in the deep state. So this is a confirmation. I mean, not that we've doubted it, but Mark Meadows, he's a level-headed guy. And he's not going to speak unless he knows of which he speaks. And he's saying, look, there's a deep state, and there was a concerted effort to unseat the duly elected president of the United States. So that's Mark Meadows saying, look, even some ambassadors were in on that whole program. All right, let's go down to clip 11, Rob, if we can. This is Representative Doug Collins talking with Maria Bartiromo about the Mueller report, which still hasn't come out.
I think what we got to understand here, and I think what we understand is, let's go back exactly what has to happen. Mueller will present some kind of report. All the paperwork says that it could be a report on what he's found, what his prosecutions were, and what his declinations were, the ones he declined to prosecute. That is given to Bill Barr. Bill Barr, at that point, then he makes what's called an explanation to basically 4 people that have to be notified. It doesn't say that we're the only ones or at the same time have to be notified, but we have to be notified. So it can be released to the public as long as we are notified.
And he's talking about the heads of the judiciary committees in both the House and the Senate and the intelligence committees on both sides. They have to receive a copy of that report, but the law doesn't require that anybody else be given the ability to see it. So this will be a call. Ultimately, it's going to be up to Bill Barr. Now, let's go to clip 12. This is pollster Mark Penn, certified Democrat. He was a pollster for President Bill Clinton. And here's what he has to say.
So I think we know the conclusion, and we know also increasingly as these transcripts come out that the underlying foundation for this investigation never really existed, that the Steele dossier was never verified and never should have been the basis for this, and the firing of Comey that triggered the independent counsel also had no basis in fact or law to create an independent counsel.
Yeah, so the special counsel should never have been there in the first place, and we know how they handled the Hillary Clinton investigation. Jim Baker apparently testified that he wanted to charge her with gross negligence, but the DOJ said no. Your reaction to these directives coming from Loretta Lynch and Barack Obama's DOJ?
Well, the Lisa Page transcript really is quite stunning, because what Lisa Page is saying is that the Justice Department, before the investigation was really done, said that they were not going to prosecute. Therefore, the fact that Comey then says no one knows the conclusion, right, is a lie. It's a laughing matter, because of course he knew the conclusion. The conclusion had been dictated before the investigation began.
And that's when James Comey went before the nation July 5th and said Hillary's off the hook. No reasonable prosecutor in his right mind would try to prosecute this case. Basically exonerated her, which he has no authority to do. But that deed had already been done. He was drafting that exoneration letter before the investigation with Hillary was even close to being cleared or completed. Hillary had not even been interrogated, talked to by FBI agents. All right, let's go back to where we were in the rundown. Let's go to clip number 3. This is Glenn Greenwald of The Intercept, which is kind of an intelligence publication. He's talking here with Laura Ingraham and about the problem that the Democrats have because of where the Mueller investigation is at.
We actually saw this, Laura, during the 2018 midterm, where the victorious Democratic candidates, knowing their local districts really well, almost never mention what the Democratic National Committee and MSNBC, excuse the redundancy, have spent the last 2.5 years obsessing on, to the exclusion of virtually everything else, which is not just the claim that Trump colluded with Russia, but that Russia actually controls Donald Trump in some sort of Clancy kind of espionage way as a result of blackmail or other kinds of leverage that disappeared from the winning campaigns of 2018 because they know that people don't wake up in the morning worried about Putin. And the 2020 candidates now see that the wheels are falling off the cart of the Mueller investigation and barely mention it at all in recognition of that fact.
All right, so this guy, Glenn Greenwald, is saying, look, the Mueller investigation is toast as far as any use to Democrats in 2020. I mean, the big meme out there is he's just a stooge of Putin's. He takes his orders from Vladimir Putin. Now, nobody is saying that Because one of the things, this is the reality, is people do not wake up in the morning wondering what Vladimir Putin is up to. Now, you don't need to wonder what Vladimir Putin is up to, because you can find out by looking, you know where? At Facebook and Twitter. Vladimir Putin, big headline on Drudge today, Putin wants to sign a law that would ban fake news, and it would punish people for posting insults online. They'd go to jail if they posted insults online. Well, who's doing that in America? Yeah. Who is punishing people for their social media posts? Who is punishing people, putting them in the equivalent of jail for posting insults or posting what they consider to be hate speech online? Well, it's Facebook and Twitter. So people say, oh, it's a good thing we don't have a Vladimir Putin. Well, we do. It's Facebook and Twitter. They are the Vladimir Putin of the United States together, occupying that role. All right, let's go to Kristen Gillibrand, clip number 4. I mean, we have Biden has entered the race yesterday. Do you have our little handy clip handy? We had Biden enter. We've had Beto O'Rourke, total flame out for Beto O'Rourke, I believe, coming up. But anyway, the field is getting crowded.
You're going to need a bigger boat.
Going to need a bigger boat and a bigger shark. What?
Did Biden officially announce?
No.
Oh, okay.
We've got that. We got that clip where basically he did. Okay, this is Biden trying not to declare for the presidency.
I'm told I get criticized by the new left. I have the most progressive record of anybody running for the anybody who would run.
So everybody took that as an announcement. I got the most progressive record of anybody running in this. Oh, he's running. Then he's tried to back away from that, but they have a hard time doing it. All right, Kristen Gillibrand, clip number 4. And again, this is somebody who wants to be United States Senator.
What he has done on the border is inhumane and intolerable. He is separating families, children from parents, mothers from babies, and locking up people in facilities that are run by for-profit prison companies. It's an outrage. I would get rid of all of that. That should not be under ICE. It should not be under Homeland Security. Immigration is not a security issue. It is an economic and a humanitarian and a family issue. There is no such thing as an illegal human.
Illegal human. You know, nobody says anybody is an illegal human being. This is not about whether people are illegals, but whether behavior is illegal. And if you transgress on another nation's sovereign territory, you have become an illegal alien, an illegal trespasser, just as much if you trespass on somebody's property without permission, you invade their home without permission, you have become an illegal trespasser. You're still a human being, but you have committed an illegal act and should be punished. All right, let's grab, I think we'll probably only be able to get one of these. Let's try to grab clip number 5. Jonathan Elias works with Cheryl Atkinson talking about MS-13.
President Trump calls it a border crisis and a dangerous threat to public safety. But how many crimes are committed by illegal immigrants? The Government Accountability Office, a nonpartisan agency that works for Congress, found that between 2011 and 2016, 35% of inmates in federal prisons were criminal aliens, most coming from Central America and nearby countries. And during that time, the federal government paid about $1.5 billion each year to keep them behind bars. MS-13 got its start in Los Angeles, but is rooted today in Central America. It's become a dangerous export to the U.S. and the biggest target for President Trump. MS-13 is as violent as gangs come. Their motto, kill, steal, rape, control. The White House says there are about 10,000 MS-13 gang members in the U.S. today. On Long Island in 2016, MS-13 members used machetes and bats to kill 16-year-old Nisa Mickens and her best friend Kyla Cuevas. In Maryland in 2017, these 3 MS-13 gang members were arrested for brutally stabbing a victim more than 100 times, cutting off his head and cutting out his heart. Nationwide since 2012, an average of about 35 murders tied to MS-13 every year.
That's MS-13. So when somebody tells you that immigration is not a national security issue, you tell them about MS-13 cutting the heads off of people, then cutting out their hearts, and then stabbing them 100 times. That's it for today. Bow low before God, stand tall before man, stand in the gap, and never forget New Mexico shows us we're fighting a winnable war. See you tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast, may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
During times of war, communication is critical. In World War I, vital information was relayed by pigeons, dogs, telephone, and radio.
We interrupt this program for a special news bulletin.
Today, in the culture war of ideas and agendas, communication is critical too. Stay informed with Sandy Rios in the morning, weekdays starting at 7 Central on American Family Radio. This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. Newly released